while you imagine yourself in a place devoted to a timeless duty, a place where seconds are tended like a delicate garden. If you find peace here, a soft like and a calm subscribe help this little channel. Keep the lights dim and the stories unhurried, and the playlist in the description is there for you. A slow river of more gentle science to drift along as you fall asleep. What time is it for you at this exact moment? Imagine yourself stepping into a corridor, long and hushed, with the quietest hum of air moving through vents, a steady breath that never tires. The floor is smooth, the lights are soft, a dim golden tone that settles the mind. Doors line the hallway, each one a threshold into a room that feels like a whisper, a space where precision has a scent and a shape. You walk slowly, hearing your footsteps, feeling the coolness of the air that has been carefully held at the same temperature all day and all night. Behind one of these doors, you find a lab where time does not begin and time does not end. In this room, people willingly keep watch over moments, tending the rhythm that keeps the world synchronized in its dance. The room is gentle and orderly. Racks of instruments stand like quiet trees, their tiny lights blinking with a sleepy regularity. A monitor glows softly with graphs that rise and fall like the tide. In the center, a steel chamber rests under layers of shielding, a polished object with cables tucked neatly, with vacuum lines that seem to sigh. The room smells faintly of clean electronics and cold metal, with a hint of dust that has been coaxed away with care. You listen, and you hear fans spinning at a low tone, a note that becomes a lullaby the longer you stay. The gentle rhythm continues, and you breathe a little slower. The heart of this place is a clock that does not look like a clock. There is no face with hands, no ticking gear, no pendulum that swings. The pendulum is hidden inside the atom, a change in energy that repeats with a steadiness only nature can provide. The clock keeps time with the dance of electrons around a cesium nucleus, a pattern as quiet as light moving across a smooth wall. An atomic clock like this does not ask anyone to wind it, and it does not tire. It listens to atoms singing at a frequency so steady, so sure, that the second itself is defined by this song. Inside the chamber, as still as a held breath, cesium atoms are guided by fields, cooled until they move more slowly, and gently nudged by microwaves that match the rhythm of a subtle transition. When the rhythm is true, the atoms respond with contentment, and their contentment tells the clock that time is flowing at just the right pace. You take a slow breath and let the idea settle. The second is not a human invention. It is a discovery, a recognition of a pattern that nature offers. The official second is based on the cesium atom, which responds at a frequency of 9,192,631,770 cycles per second. The numbers can float past like clouds. What matters is the feeling, a pattern that does not hurry, a pattern that does not drift, a pattern that has been here longer than we have, waiting to be heard. In one corner, a blue beam of light is held steady by careful hands and careful machines. In another, a spotless optical table holds tells you how little time can wander. These optical clocks do not just keep time, they listen for time's subtlest tremors. They can sense the fraction of a second that separates the top of a mountain from a valley, because gravity bends time like it bends the path of falling water. The gentle rhythm continues as you imagine the caretaker moving around the room with unhurried steps. They check the vacuum gauge to be sure the pressure is low enough that almost no atoms of air remain, because the clock must be free from collisions that would nudge it off course. They look at a graph that shows stability spreading over hours, over days, like a slow painting that becomes more detailed the longer you gaze at it. They open a logbook, its pages filled with neat handwriting, a quiet history of a machine that serves the world humbly and without complaint. When a number sits within its expected range, they note it with a small, satisfied pen stroke. When a number drifts, they wait, and they watch, and they make a tiny adjustment that brings it home. You can feel the calm. You can know that tending a clock is like tending a garden. You water a little, you trim a leaf, you adjust the shade. You step back and let time do what it does best. Outside this room, the whole world leans on time. Phones align to a common beat. Computers share data by clicking along in unison. Satellites spiral across the sky, timing their signals with precision so that when your device asks for its location, it can answer with an accuracy that fits in the palm of your hand. All of this depends on laboratories like this one and caretakers who prefer quiet, who enjoy a night shift where the loudest sound is the hum of orderly equipment. The gentle rhythm continues, and you can almost hear the world sigh in relief, knowing someone is watching the second hand in a place where there is no hand and no face, only resonance. You imagine the cesium fountain, a tower of gentle motion. Cold atoms are tossed upward in a soft parabolic arc, passing through a microwave cavity on the way up and again on the way down. The two interactions combine to produce an interference pattern, a subtle ripple in a hidden wave that sharpens the measure of the frequency. The atoms rise, they fall, they return, like drops of water in a fountain that never spills. In the corner sits a hydrogen maser, a keeper of short-term steadiness, a stable hum for the ticking seconds, while the fountain provides careful truth over the long run. Together, they offer a time signal that does not quiver or wander, a signal that is exported from this quiet room to a broader world. The caretaker leans close to a small control panel and taps a button softer than a whisper. A trace on the screen nudges into place, the way a blanket is pulled a little closer on a cool night. When we think about time in this way, it becomes simple. Frequency is a heartbeat. Count the beats, and you have seconds. Count the seconds, and you have minutes, hours, days. As that counting flows on, it suggests how to live, not in a rush, not in big leaps, but in gentle increments. In the flow of time, a few seconds make little difference. In the long run, as clocks know well, small drifts become a story. So the caretaker watches small drifts, learns their patterns, shapes them with tiny touches that bring the flow back to center. The quiet motion that does not need to announce itself. The gentle rhythm continues, and you breathe out. If you picture the room again, you might notice the layers of shielding that encircle the heart of the clock. Magnetic fields are held away with mu metal, a material that wraps the clock like a protective coat. Temperature is held steady by layers of insulation and the patience of a climate control system that moves air as smoothly as a librarian turns a page. Lasers draw narrow lines of colour across the table and into the vacuum chamber, their frequencies stabilized by optical cavities that do not seem to age. Those cavities are shaped to keep any vibration at bay, resting on supports that damp gentle tremors from footsteps or faraway traffic. Every piece of the system agrees to be calm, quiet, predictable. The caretaker listens with instruments that translate the calm into numbers on a screen. The numbers move a little, the way leaves rustle in a light wind. When they move too much, adjustments are made and the stillness returns. There is a language used in this quiet world that is both simple and elegant. Stability describes how steadily the clock ticks from moment to moment. Accuracy describes how well the clock's count aligns with the true rhythm, defined by the atom. Uncertainty is the measure of how much we do not know, how far the truth might be from our best estimate. The caretaker learns to guide each of these, to make stability stronger, to reduce uncertainty like smoothing a wrinkle in a cloth. Not every day brings a grand change. Most nights are routines that whisper together. The vacuum holds, the lasers stay locked, the microwave cavity maintains its tone. The gentle rhythm continues, and the clock keeps on. Outside, the stars drift across the black, and their motion is a reminder that timekeeping is older than any machine. Long ago, people watched the sky as their clock. They traced the sun's path with shadows on stone, noticed how the moon's face changed, learned to expect the return of certain stars at certain seasons. Water clocks poured minutes from one bowl to another with a hush like rain on a porch roof. Sand flowed through narrow glass, a patient river of grains. Later, weights and springs and escapements took up the task, and the pendulum became a faithful friend. Brassy faces shone in candlelight, and a tick followed by a tock, followed by a tick, filled rooms with the sound of domestic time. The caretaking then was different, but not entirely so. Oil on a gear tooth, a gentle twist of a key, the listening for the proper rate at which a pendulum swings. The feeling is the same. You tend a rhythm. You keep it company. You help it speak clearly. You can wander in your thoughts to a ship at sea, steadying itself on a heaving surface. A chronometer keeps perfect time for the captain, so the ship can know its longitude. The instrument is isolated from the motion, wrapped in gimbals, kept close to a known temperature, attended with an affection that sailors gave to living creatures. This care for time allowed people to cross oceans and arrive where they intended. On railways, clocks coordinated schedules, so trains passed safely, so freight reached markets, so families met at platforms true. The gentle rhythm continues across centuries, adapted to new instruments, but unchanged in spirit. You can return to the lab now, the way a thought returns to a soft chair. The caretaker watches as a femtosecond frequency comb, a device that makes a ruler out of light, spreads a controlled rainbow across space. Each tooth of that comb is a precise tick, a way of connecting the ultra-fast pulse of an optical clock to the slower pace of electronic counters and the practical world of timing signals sent along fiber and radio. The comb turns light into numbers and numbers into time. It allows optical clocks that count at hundreds of trillions of cycles per second to share their precision with devices that need something slower. The caretaker checks that the comb's mode spacing is stable, that the carrier envelope offset is locked, that the reference oscillator feeding the system is behaving with the quiet integrity of a good friend. The terms slip past like leaves on water. The essence remains. Make it steady. Keep it steady. Let it be a calm light across the night. Time does not flow at the same rate everywhere, and even that idea can be comforting. Gravity holds time gently near a massive body, slowing the flow a tiny amount. Clocks higher up run a little faster than clocks lower down. Speed also influences the flow, making a moving clock slow down relative to one at rest. In this lab, those effects are not ignored. They are embraced with a careful mind. A clock's altitude is measured, and corrections are made, so that the beat here aligns with the beat in other places. On satellites that circle Earth, the difference in their speed and the difference in the gravity they feel are part of how they function. Those satellites carry clocks, and their system is designed to use those clocks while gently correcting for the environment through which they move. This does not create drama, it creates trust. Knowing what to expect is a form of peace. You can think about a network of such laboratories spread around the planet in quiet rooms with tidy wires and patient people. Each lab maintains its realization of coordinated time, a local flavor of a worldwide standard. These local times are compared to each other by sending carefully shaped signals through cables and across the sky, balancing the timing so that the differences are known. The differences become the path toward harmony. A central group calculates the composite timescale from these inputs, smooths it, refines it, and publishes the result. When it is time to adjust the public time to match the Earth's rotation more closely, a small pause is introduced at the end of a day, and a second is repeated. The pause is uneventful. It allows the day to hold still for just a moment, to bring civil time and the turning Earth back into alignment. The gentle rhythm continues, and you can let yourself feel how comforting it is that day after day. Small, thoughtful corrections keep the world in sync. The caretaker often moves in small patterns. They adjust a mirror with a tool that feels like tweaking the string of a harp, and the laser spot shifts a hair's breadth and then stays. They tighten a connector and feel the warmth of the metal, the quiet firmness of a good fit. They bring their ear closer to a module to hear that the fan's tone has not changed, that the cooling is still sufficient for the electronics inside. They slide a cover across across an optical table and see how the light becomes even more stable in the dark. They brush a small speck of dust away from a lens with the lightest touch, like the touch you use to draw a blanket up without disturbing your own breathing. At a screen, a graph of Allen deviation traces a curve downward with longer averaging time. It is a plot that shows how stability improves as you allow successive measurements to wash over one another, how noises average away like ripples smoothing out on a quiet lake. The caretaker knows this curve the way a gardener knows when a plant is content. The numbers reflect years of design, years of learning what can move a frequency up or down. They hold calculations that anticipate the small pulls and pushes from magnetic fields, from black body radiation, from collisions between atoms, from the not quite perfect vacuum. They hold the way of isolating a system from outside influences without becoming brittle, without becoming fragile. The gentle rhythm continues while the plot drifts softly lower, a promise of steadier time when measured across hours and days. As you stay in this room in your mind, the passage of real time feels different. Minutes stretch, not in boredom, but in ease. The lack of sudden noise leaves space for thoughts to unfurl. Stories arise easily when there is no rush. A caretaker remembers the first time they saw a laser capture atoms in a shimmering beam, felt wonder without fireworks, like noticing the delicate symmetry of a fern leaf. They remember when they realized that a clock can be an instrument of empathy, that tending it is a service to people they will never meet, to strangers waking up on time for work, to astronauts aligning maneuvers, to financial trades settling in a fair order, to researchers looking for subtle changes that hint at new physics. The service is quiet. The effect ripples gently outward. In another world of timekeeping, the humble quartz watch beats with an affordable regularity. Inside is a sliver of crystalline stone, cut to a shape that makes it vibrate at a known frequency when a voltage is applied. That vibration is counted by simple circuits that divide the waves into seconds. It is less perfect than the singing atom, but it is good enough for most of life. It is strong and it is tiny and it has lived with us for decades. Quartz watches and clocks fill landscapes of home and office, school and hospital, lab and field station. Their glow is the glow of everyday time, a steady amber that keeps meetings aligned and ovens honest. When the network reaches them, they take a cue from the grander clocks in the labs. They align themselves to signals sent over the air, through radio beacons, through satellite constellations, or through the lines that carry data through cities and under oceans. The large and the small touch each other lightly. The gentle rhythm continues from atom to quartz to software to daily life. Time distribution is a quiet art. From a clock like the one in this lab, a signal is shaped into a pulse per second tick, into a high-frequency tone, into a stream of timestamps that travel along fiber and, sometimes, radio. Computers consult these signals with simple protocols that ask for the time and then correct for the time the question and the answer needed to travel. State machines move to the next agreed moment together. In some places, this proceeds with sub-microsecond certainty, enough to coordinate delicate experiments or synchronize radio antennas across a continent. so they act as one ear. In other places, the timing is coarser, but still trustworthy enough to keep things orderly. The distribution is designed with redundancy, where multiple paths offer resilience, and quiet equipment in quiet rooms watches for deviations, the way a night watch notes the change in the wind. The caretaker understands this network as an ecosystem. The roots are here, healthy in the soil of careful design. The branches extend outward to shade and shelter. When the caretaker pauses, they may think about pulsars, spinning neutron stars that flash radio waves at intervals so regular that these beacons in the galaxy hint at a timekeeping system written in the remnants of stellar hearts. There is something soothing about knowing that even beyond Earth, there are patterns you can count on. If you were to lie down on a floor near this quiet equipment and close your eyes, you might imagine the hum of a hydrogen maser is cousin to the whispers of things that turn in deep space. The feeling is not grand, it is gentle, a bed of consistency that can hold you up. Closer to home, the motion of Earth itself is a gentle irregularity. The rotation is not perfectly steady because our planet responds to the mix of wind and water, to the shifts of mass in ice and ocean, to the quiet sliding of tectonic plates. These variations are slight, the way a resting human's breathing is naturally varied from breath to breath. Our civil time remains aligned to the sun. By letting that imperfection be known and making small adjustments in a smooth way, adding a second on rare evenings so clocks and sunsets stay friends. In this lab, the rhythm remains calm as the wider world makes room for that little pause. Imagine moving your hand across a glass panel, with your fingertips floating over the controls that guide the amplitude of a microwave field. The sensation of smoothness, the small click as you reach the end of travel, the way the numbers adjust by tenths, is a physical pleasure. In a notch near the vacuum chamber, a volume of metal acts as a resonant cavity where the microwave field can build precisely, its shape tuned so that it fills the space as intended. Coils along a cylinder create a static magnetic field that is deliberately gentle, a bias that defines a direction, a way to lift the degeneracy of energy levels so the transition becomes libs, clearly shaped, clearly pronounced. The caretaker makes sure the field is right. The atoms feel this kindness and respond with a clean signal. From the atoms and the cavity and the electronics comes a beat that is too fast to hear. Instruments divided down. The beat becomes a pulse. The pulse becomes a reference. The reference flows to instruments that keep logs, to comparators that note the tiny differences between this clock and another. Outgoing signals pass through amplifiers whose task is to be transparent. They do not add their own story. They bow to the clock's story, the simplest story of repetitive motion that does not tire. In another room, a rack holds an ensemble of clocks. The ensemble is a garden of time, where each plant is a slightly different variety, with different strengths. Some keep the day steady, with a perfection that is extraordinary, but costlier to maintain. caretakers hold steady minute to minute in a way that damps jiggles and noise. Together they form a time scale, a gentle average that outperforms any single clock. When a unit shows signs of stress, a little more weight shifts to another. When maintenance is needed, one instrument can rest without the garden going dry. The caretaker visits each member of the ensemble and listens for signs of discomfort. Fans are cleaned, cables are refreshed, connectors are reseated. The little chores are done without haste. Imagine yourself as a caretaker in the moment before dawn, when the building is at its quietest. The world outside is cooled. The streets are almost empty. Inside, the screens are still, and the air has the steady feel of a room that has been closed to uncertainty. You make tea or a simple drink that warms your hands. You stand at the window and look at the sky and think about how timekeeping began with that sky and its daily prompts. You return to the equipment and look at a plot that shows that the past few hours have been well behaved. You add a line to the log that says, in essence, that you were here and that the clock was content. The gentle rhythm continues, and you feel yourself melt into the chair a little. The science of these clocks can be intricate without being difficult to hold in your sleepy mind. Atoms have energy levels, like shelves in a very orderly pantry. The shelves for cesium carry labels that reflect the combination of the atom's tiny magnetic moments, aligning with or against one another. A transition between two of these levels is a difference that comes with a frequency. If a field matches that frequency, atoms will move between the levels, absorbing or emitting energy in a predictable way. The lab creates a well-controlled environment so the atoms feel only the intended fields, so their motion is predictably slowed, so their collisions are sparse. By measuring how often the atoms flip levels under a microwave field, and by adjusting the microwave frequency to maximize that flipping, the clock locks itself to the atom's rhythm. The lock is never aggressive. It is a soft tug. The frequency is adjusted by a feedback loop, which listens and nudges, listens and nudges. The loop is slow enough to avoid chasing noise, quick enough to correct truly relevant changes. To watch the loop is like watching a caretaker tuck in a child and ease them towards sleep. In optical clocks, the shelves are closer together in terms of energy, but the song is higher. The cycles are so many that the counting becomes more precise, simply because more cycles occur in any given second. The challenge is different. The lasers must be extraordinarily steady, which means creating references that drift even less than the lasers would otherwise drift. Materials like ultra-low expansion glass and single crystal silicon are used to build cavities that change length slightly with temperature and that vibrate very little. The cavity is housed at a carefully chosen temperature, held away from warmth or drafts, perched on pads that mute vibrations. The laser is forced to care about this cavity through a feedback loop similar to the one in the microwave system. The resulting light becomes as steady as a lullaby. When it interacts with the atoms in their lattice or ion trap, it produces a resonance that can be followed with the same tender attention. So the optical frequency remains anchored to the atom, even as the atom floats gently in its cage of light. The gentle rhythm continues as you think about how these devices are compared to one another across distance. A long fiber optic link can carry a stable signal for hundreds of kilometers, sometimes more, with careful measures that cancel out the noise introduced by the fiber's own changing length as the temperature and the environment affect it. Two-way satellite time transfer lets labs exchange timing in a way that balances the delays in both directions. Across continents, such links weave a quiet network, an invisible braid of synchronized moments. The labs submit reports that tell how their clocks behaved. From these, a smooth average is created that becomes a world timescale, a reference that anyone can use. Different places may adjust their local time to the world average slightly, or just record the offset so that devices can be brought into alignment without confusion. The presence of these shared times helps keep the promises of schedules, infrastructures, and scientific collaborations. If your mind drifts, let it. It is allowed to wander down slow hallways that branch off into museums of old clocks, into sections of railroads that used harmonized time to avoid collisions in places that used to rely on local noon. Imagine glass domes over ornate mechanisms, a visible reminder that care is an art learned in small steps. Picture thumb wheels turned by people who lived in a world with fewer digits on screens, a world that still needed the comfort of knowing trains would meet when they were meant to meet. Timekeeping has always been a blend of the practical and the poetic, of necessity and a wish for harmony. In tending an atomic clock, the caretaker is part of a tradition. They do not feel it as a weight. It is a quiet companionship with people who cared before, and people who will care after. The gentle rhythm continues, unbroken by the changing tools. The word duty in this context carries no sternness. It is a promise kept again and again, with kindness. Duty here is a hand taking care of small things, so larger things can proceed breath by breath. You can picture a night log as a long poem of small events, logged, stable, synced, trimmed, confirmed. In the morning, someone else reads this poem and adds a few lines, and the poem goes on for months and years. The clock in its shielded chamber ages so slowly that it barely seems to change. Its heart is an assembly of parts that are made to be faithful, that prefer the comfort of things staying the same, that were chosen to live in a temperature range where expansion and contraction balance and do not stress the bonds. The wiring is neat because loose wires are not just messy, they are invitations to noise. The neatness is comfort, the neatness is discipline, the neatness is a way of treating time itself with respect and tenderness. You can feel a soft kinship with the idea that even at home, you can tend time in small ways. You place a clock where it gets a steady signal and is not knocked about. You set a morning alarm and trust that it will sing when needed. You note how your own days feel best when they have a rhythm that aligns with your nature. You adjust your bedtime gently. You listen to your own internal clock, that sense of day length and light that lives in you. The caretaker does not enforce a schedule on the world. They keep open a path on which the world can choose to walk steadily. You can rest knowing history that is shared with colleagues in other labs. Trust is built in the small habit of writing and reading and sharing, of answering with clarity when something unusual occurs. It does not require drama, only attention. In your mind, you can walk from this room to another, where a cryogenic sapphire oscillator hums contentedly in a cold nest, providing a frequency so clean that it acts as a foundation for short-term stability. You can feel the difference in the air near this device, the way the cooling lines give the faintest sense of a breeze. The tone it supports feeds the loops that keep other tones in line. It is part of a beautiful layering. Stable short-term sources support averaging, while accurate long-term references keep the entire enterprise honest. In long, slow hours, the caretaker might read about an atom interferometer that uses the wave nature of atoms to measure gravity's pull with tenderness, or a spaceborne clock that carries the pulse of a lab into orbit, or a paper describing a clock so sensitive that its frequency reveals the slight change in gravitational potential between the floor and the tabletop. These stories do not bring tension. They bring a hum of curiosity, a comfortable warmth. The idea that time can be measured at this level lets us see the world as textured with subtle differences, like a field that looks flat from afar but up close has a gentle relief you can only feel when you lay your hand on it. It deepens and then begins to dissolve. You imagine the caretaker stepping away to stretch, to sip water that tastes faintly of the vessel it came from, to bring their attention back to a screen with a feeling of returning to a quiet conversation. The equipment responds with sameness, the same patterns, the same small drifts, the same corrections. Sometimes the caretaker's body mirrors the system. The breathing becomes regular, the shoulders loosen, the eyes move with an easy scan from one instrument to another. There is no need to make it more than it is. It is the simplest and loveliest thing to look after something that looks after everyone. Still awake. Comment the secret word. Nebula. A new day begins somewhere else entirely, and the network stands ready to carry time in many forms. Network time protocols move in packets that can be lost and found without stress, crossing switches and routers that keep flowing. In contexts where tighter coordination matters, a more precise method sequences steps so that delays cancel, stamping events with times that match as closely as needed for the purpose they serve. In wireless worlds, radio-based stations use shared time to hand off connections smoothly and to build signals that do not tangle with each other. In studios and theatres, lighting and audio drift into synchrony so that performances flow as one, while backstage cues are triggered by marks on a timeline. In factories, machines communicate with fewer misunderstandings when their sense of the present is aligned. It is an invisible alignment, but it is felt as smoothness, as a reduction in friction that would otherwise show up as jitter or delay. As you rest in this story, the idea of leap seconds may pass your thoughts like a yawn. A day with a little extra at its end is a reminder that the world outside the lab is not a metronome that came from nowhere. It is a spinning sphere that reacts circadian rhythm that responds to light and darkness, the sense of a week's length, the cadence of seasons. There is also the finely tuned world of sub-second coordination that most people do not feel directly. A caretaker of atomic clocks stands at the junction of these scales. Their work supports the fine scale while being anchored in the broad scale of days and weeks. The schedule is chosen to suit the equipment and the person. The hand on a doorknob in the evening is different from the hand on a doorknob in the morning. The late hours have their own taste, their own softness. Entering the lab at night can feel like entering a library where the shelves themselves are softly breathing. At a bench, the caretaker might use a small alignment tool to adjust the path of a laser beam. The beam is invisible to the eye, but its spot appears on a card as a dot of weak glow, made visible by a gentle fluorescence. The tool turns by tiny steps, and the dot slides a fraction to sit in the center of a marked circle. They tighten a screw, and the dot does not move. They smile inwardly and move on, because such a small perfection is enjoyable in itself, a reminder that the world responds to careful hands. The vacuum chamber might be pumped by an ion pump, a device that after the roughing pumps have done their work, continues to keep the chamber ghostly empty by trapping residual gas on plates or converting it through gentle continual action. The reading on the gauge is a number so small that it almost seems like zero, but not quite. It is small enough to be good. The smallness is a big comfort. In that smallness, atoms can fly unbothered for long distances inside the chamber, and their responses will reflect only the fields designed for them. The caretaker writes down the number in the log, the way a cook notes the exact temperature for their dough, even after many years of making the same bread. In the hallway, the maintenance of the building itself proceeds in fitful, distant muffles. Someone polishes floors. Someone replaces a filter. The people who do this work are part of the same ecosystem of care. The clock does not stand alone. It lives in a building that keeps it warm in winter, cool in summer, and clean all year. It lives in a community of hands that all want things to run smoothly. If the caretaker ever needs help, there is a list of calls to make. The relationships are as carefully maintained as the instruments. Trust is not only in numbers, it is also in people who answer softly in the night and say they will come. In thinking about the flow of time, your breath takes on a loose rhythm that you do not need to manage. The narration flows past you like slow water, and your mind can follow as far as it wishes. There is no finish line. There is no test. You can let these images of equipment and gentle hands, of screens and tables, float away and then drift back. You can revisit the cesium fountain with its cold atoms arcing up and down, the hydrogen masser resting in its box like a sleeping pet, the sapphire oscillator humming in the cold. You can revisit the optical lattice where atoms are caught in a standing wave, as if placed gently in the nodes and antinodes of light. In some labs, a strontium optical clock holds its atoms at temperatures far below any winter you have ever known. The atoms barely move, and their motion no longer confuses the frequency. A lattice holds them in a comb formed by a laser's reflection, a pattern precise that it becomes a little crystal made of light. The probing laser has a frequency many times higher than the microwaves in a fountain clock, so the ratio between the optical frequency and a stable microwave reference must be measured with a frequency comb. This brings all the clocks into conversation. Instruments that seem specialized or isolated are actually very social, joined by links and comparisons that improve them all. In time, these optical clocks take turns leading the time scale, contributing their stability to the world average and feeding a chain that ends in the devices around us that tell us whether it is time to leave or time to rest. An image comes to mind of an ancient stone sundial, warm in the afternoon, and next to it a sleek black box humming with the modern hum. Both are timekeepers, separated by centuries of thinking, connected by the same desire to align human life with repeating patterns. Both are tended. The sundial is brushed clear of leaves. The atomic clock is brushed clear of dust. The sundial relies on the sun's path. The atomic clock relies on a pattern embedded in matter itself. Both invite steadiness. The gentle rhythm continues in sunshine and in air-conditioned rooms, through the changing technologies and unchanging intentions. In urban centers, radio signals transmit a time code, a rhythm and a count that devices can follow. Some countries maintain long-wave transmitters that offer a voice of time that reaches far, bending around the curvature of Earth like a soft-voiced host, reaching many rooms in a house. Other systems use satellites that share their timing, allowing small receivers in clocks and phones to pick up a beat that can be trusted. People who care about time arrange for backups and redundancy because they know that though equipment is reliable, the world can surprise. Redundancy is not pessimism. It is comfort, the way you might have an extra blanket folded at the foot of a bed. For many, timekeeping sounds like a strict, cold discipline. Inside a lab, the feeling is the opposite. It is warm, careful, and patient. There is humor in the margins of logbooks, short notes that only colleagues would find funny. There are small rituals, like tapping a rack twice after reseating a module, not as superstition, but as a reminder to the mind to double-check that everything is snug. There are shared coffee cups and the tradition of leaving a little surprise snack for the next shift. There is the ongoing exchange of simple kindness, which holds a lab together more securely than any bolt. You think about a child asking to know their bedtime and whether they can stay up a little longer. You think about how those small negotiations with time shape a life. The caretaker smiles at the thought and returns attention to the instruments. A modern optical clock's uncertainty can be so low that it would take more than the age of the universe to drift by a second at its current performance. That number is not a brag. It is a gentle wonder. It means that the world can rely on a source of time that is as close to unchanging as anything we can make. It means the ground under many technological feet is firm and will stay firm. The method of comparing clocks often involves beating one signal against another to produce a difference frequency. This difference can be much lower than the original frequencies, making it easier to see the small dancing between the two. It is like comparing two singers by listening to the slight wavering when they hold a note together. If the beat drifts slowly, you can measure how and make an adjustment. If one source is steady and the other is not, the comparison reveals which one needs attention. The caretaker sets up these comparisons in a way that lets them walk away for a while. The software stores the data and plots the results. The lab becomes a long-term listener, and the caretaker becomes a curator of listening sessions that last days or weeks. Temperature control is a quiet theme. Even materials designed to resist expansion will respond to temperature. The lab's air is held near a constant value that was chosen because at that point the materials in the cavity or the optical table tend to relax and stay. The building systems have a rhythm of their own, and the lab is buffered from the building with a small extra layer of control. The caretaker understands these nested shells of stability. They adjust the set point with the feel of a person adjusting the flame under a pot. Not too much, not too little, just enough to keep the simmer even. Some tasks are about calibration. A frequency counter must be disciplined to the master reference. A time interval analyzer must know exactly how long its internal second is. These are little ceremonies. The master is connected. The device is told to listen to the master. The panel shows a small icon that confirms the bond. After a few moments, the readings settle and the instruments become an extension of the clock rather than separate storytellers. Now the entire room speaks in the same accent. The gentle rhythm continues. In letters exchanged between labs, there is a respect that comes from shared experience. Someone describes a small hiccup with a power supply that caused a few hours of data to be flagged. Someone else shares a new method to shield a cavity more effectively. These are small items, but together they form a literature that is alive, a daily practice that sits alongside formal publications. To tend a clock is to be part of a quiet, global conversation. The conversation continues regardless of holidays, or weather, or politics. It continues because it is anchored in something that flows under all those changes, and because it is maintained by people who find satisfaction in keeping something beautiful completely ordinary. In your own life, you can bring a piece of this attitude into simple tasks. Wiping a counter slowly, folding laundry with edges aligned, setting a reminder with a calm finger on a screen, recognizing that a small delay inserted gently can smooth a day. Atomic clock care is a form of gentle intentionality, and that can be practiced anywhere, with any object, at any scale. Waiting for water to boil without fuss, walking a little slower in a hallway, checking a door is locked by trying it twice, gently. The value is not in the speed, it is in the steadiness. As the caretaker checks the monitoring server for the status of remote links, they may run a diagnostic that pings another lab across the country. The path the data takes through fiber beneath roads and fields, under rivers and through mountain passes, is invisible but real. The delays are measured, the asymmetries are corrected. The timescale here is compared to the timescale there, and the report comes back that the difference is within expected bounds. The caretaker notes this with the same calm manner as before. Not too side by side like parallel lines on a sheet of paper, and that pulses pass along them to arrive on time, like friends arriving at a dinner table without the need for choreography. In distant radio observatories, antennas spread across the land point at a quasar, a bright point in the distant sky. They record signals tied to local clocks so stable that later, when the recordings are brought together, the timing across thousands of kilometers is coherent. The many ears behave like one ear the size of a continent. This is only possible because in many quiet rooms, like the one you are imagining, clocks hum with integrity and people tend them with love. That love can be very quiet and very practical. Tightening the screw, checking the log, restarting the process, eating a snack, breathing. The gentle rhythm continues. Sometimes a person new to the lab will ask how it feels to be responsible for time. The caretaker smiles and says that they are not responsible for time. They are responsible for an instrument and for good practices and for kindness. Time is fine on its own. The lab makes sure that our devices see time clearly. The modesty in this answer is part of the culture. It protects the work from ego. It keeps the focus on the task and its many small beauties. In the watchful hours, a frequency comb slides slightly, and an alarm appears on a screen as a soft color change, not a loud sound. The caretaker notices and leans in, makes an adjustment, and waits for the icon to change back. After it does, they make a note and sit quietly for a few minutes, letting the return to normal soak in. A feather drifts through memory, a sentence in a book, a smile from a colleague the day before. Quietness accumulates little treasures like these. The care for clocks responds also to the way buildings live. During the day, many people moving around bring subtle vibrations, small temperature changes, and tiny fluctuations in power. At night, the building rests. Labs that need the deepest quiet often work in the calm of the night. The caretaker can plan certain measurements for that time to take advantage of the lower noise. The lab and the building and the city have a pulse. The clock nestles into the low parts of that pulse when it can. You can imagine the path from an atomic reference to a standard wall clock in a kitchen. The path goes from atom to microwave, to counter, to digital time code, and to a network. From the network to a computer, then to a phone that also watches the satellites above. From the phone to an alarm, and from the alarm to your waking. The ancient stars gave way to an atom, and atoms whisper to a phone. It is a delicate lineage. It tells you that your breakfast is not only yours. It is part of a world where invisible leadership happens in quiet labs, staffed by people who do not need applause. The gentle rhythm continues and runs through everything. The caretaker sometimes carefully shifts the position of the entire vacuum assembly by the tiniest amount to make sure the gravitational potential is known, or simply to create room for a new piece of shielding. The work is done with a lift and soft straps, and with several hands moving in slow unison. The clock in its breathes out and knows that any new behaviors can be traced because the change was measured and recorded. Nothing is allowed to be mysterious forever. The lab likes mysteries, but not surprises. In descriptions of timekeeping, there is a phrase that speaks to the heart. Time is what clocks measure. The phrase is simple, practical, and gently philosophical. It does not insist on an answer. It carries no sharpness. It opens a door and lets you enter and look around. In a lab full of instruments, the phrase becomes literal. The measurements are here, the definitions are accepted by the world community, and the clocks agree with each other across the planet in a way that is peaceful and productive. Tools for analysis are themselves an expression of care. Software is written not to be clever, but to be robust and clear. It takes in data, filters noise sensibly, makes plots that respond smoothly when you zoom or pan, and prevents your eyes from missing a trend. The practice of writing notes in code and comments mirrors the practice of writing in the logbook. The same calm tone appears in both places. The gentle rhythm continues even in the text of functions and scripts, in the arrangement of windows on a screen. If you drift off, the story will wait. If you remain with it, more details can be imagined. The components on a circuit board arranged in a way that makes heat flow well. The ground planes that prevent interference, the use of twisted pairs and coaxial cables to carry signals without letting outside noise, creep in. The rack layout that places heat-generating modules where airflow will be smoothest. The labeling that prevents a hurried hand from choosing the wrong port. The spare parts that sit neatly in drawers, ready to be slotted when a component ages and needs to retire. All of these are forms of tending. In another flavor of timekeeping, portable atomic clocks bring a slice of the lab into the field. These devices ride in vehicles to test how time changes with height across landscapes. They measure the gravitational potential with a precision that can map an underground aquifer's changes or detect how a volcano's interior shifts. A caretaker traveling with such a clock finds themselves in new rooms, in temporary shelters, in places where the power flickers or the dust is more tenacious. The same principles apply. Shield the sensitive parts. Keep the temperature steady. Handle everything with respect. The time they offer is as calm as the time in the stationary lab. The gentle rhythm continues across movement. When people talk about precision, they sometimes imagine a hard, glassy quality, like the sheen on a polished blade. In this lab, precision is more like the surface of a lake on an early morning. Calm, reflective, aware of the slightest ripple, settling quickly when no disturbance is present. The caretaker trains their senses to enjoy that kind of calm. They learn to embolden the quiet, to foster conditions that encourage stability. Precision comes from that, from a faithful relationship with context. It is not forced. It is invited. In a corner of the room, a small display shows coordinated universal time as it is being realized here, with a note that tells the difference between it and the composite time scale that it circulates globally. The difference is tiny, and it floats up and down within narrow bounds. Seeing that number stay small is like seeing a plant that continues to thrive through seasons. The caretaker notes it when it grows, and notes it when it shrinks, and otherwise lets it be. The discipline guidebook sits on a shelf nearby, as familiar as an old novel. The caretaker has read it many times, but keeps it around because there are always details worth verifying again. On the optical table, mounted mirrors sit on posts of different height. Each post is tightened just enough to steady the mirror without stressing it. The adhesive used to secure delicate parts is chosen for its smooth cure and stable performance over temperature. A beam path is not just a path, it is a narrative. It begins at a source, is shaped by lenses that expand or focus, is reflected to change direction, is filtered to clean its profile, passes through a modulator to carry information, and finally enters the heart of the system where it performs its purpose. Each optical element introduced to the path has a reason for being and a place where it does that job best. Mirrors are angled so that any stray reflection goes to a safe dark place rather than back into a sensitive region. Blackened walls in critical areas absorb strays. The gentle rhythm continues in the way light moves from point to point without fuss. A person who tends clocks becomes aware of slow changes in themselves. Patience becomes easier. Small annoyances lose their edge. Simple pleasures deepen. The road home at sunrise smells more alive. The air tastes clearer, and the sight of a coffee cup resting exactly where it should be brings an unusual satisfaction. The work is not a tonic. It does not cure life. It just offers a model of care that can be gently borrowed for other things. You begin to set your own tasks in a sequence that makes sense. You avoid rushing when the benefit of rushing is small. You prefer neatness even when no one will see it. You become a steward of your own schedule. Backup power systems in the building offer a cushion for the clocks. Batteries and generators stand ready so that unexpected outages do not disturb the gentle pulse that leaves the lab. These backups are tested, maintained, and exercised so they do not surprise anyone. The caretaker checks their status on a panel and nods with the comfort that comes from redundancy. Protection like this is not drama. It is a layer of quiet below the quiet, a double hush that makes sleep easier for the world. Outside the lab, on a campus lawn or a city boulevard, ordinary clocks stand. A pedestrian glances up and sees the hands. Children notice the chime of a bell at noon. Office workers watch the minute hand before a meeting begins. The presence of these timepieces is a thin thread connecting daily life to the deep clocks of the lab. Children rarely ask how the big clock knows what time it is. They just trust it. This trust is a subtle gift. It is the background trust that lets society function. The same trust present in the clean water that appears when a tap is opened, in the steady lights that come on when a switch is touched, in the roads that lead where they say they lead. Tending time is one way to maintain that trust. You can let your attention drift to the quiet mathematics of uncertainty budgets. Each effect that can nudge the frequency is measured, supported by evidence, and assigned a contribution. The contribution biology lab keeps standards for other quantities as well. The mass of kilograms, the length of meters, the flow of current, the temperature of fixed points. Time flows through all of these. A current measured in coulombs per second, a speed measured in meters per second. Time is one of the core threads that ties units together. The time lab shares a kinship with these other rooms. People pass between them, sharing methods, borrowing tools, telling stories about stubborn screws and sudden insights. The quiet professions support each other, and the building breathes contentedly as its occupants practice their careful arts. There is something soothing in learning that a clock kept a stable rhythm overnight. It is a minor event. If it did not, that would be an exception. The lack of exceptions is a blessing in this context. In a broader life, exceptions are lively. They are where stories live. In this lab, stories live in the absence of exceptions. That is all right. There is room in the world for both. In the care of a clock, the blank parts of a logbook are just as beautiful as the written parts. They represent what continued without fuss. The caretaker sometimes presses an ear to the panel of a rack to hear a new sound that differs slightly from the usual. The sound is subtle. They check a temperature, find it a little high, and turn on a small auxiliary fan that changes the airflow enough to bring comfort. The reminder is simple. Even machines like this respond to gentle attention. The gentle rhythm continues after the small intervention, and on the graph, a little deviation snakes back toward the smooth baseline. A friend in another lab starts a new optical clock and publishes its first measurements. The community reads and applauds in the calm way of people who know the path is long and the stone is polished by many hands. Each new clock extends the reach of precision into the world just a little farther. Clocks, sensitive enough to see the change in gravitational potential from standing up to lying down, let us dream of geodesy that uses time itself as a surveying tool. This is a tender dream, and one that grows by patient increments. Near the end of a shift, the caretaker considers the handover notes, a list of points for the next person. A metal panel is placed back onto its rack with a soft push until the latches take hold. A last glance is given to the waveforms. A quiet satisfaction arises. Tending a clock is not heroic. It is a craft. Like baking bread for a town daily. Like sweeping a path before dawn. Like tuning an instrument in an orchestra. It provides a structure that others can enjoy without thinking about it. The joy of the caretaker is in knowing that the structure stands. In the final minutes of your imagined visit, you stand at the doorway and look back at the room. The equipment seems almost alive, breathing slowly. The blink of status lights is soothing. The soft lines of cables are like vines in a tended garden, trained to run where they do not harm the other plants. The shine of the stainless steel is like the surface of a still pond. The feeling of the air is comfortable, neither cool nor warm, holding like a hand that knows how to comfort. You let the image fill your mind and smooth its edges, letting sleep come if it wants to come. You can allow yourself to return to your own Rest well, and may your seconds tonight